Welcome back, friends. And if you're new here, I'm glad you found your way into this quiet little corner of the night. Usually, I spend my time exploring icebergs, those deep dives into the strange and hidden, but tonight is something different. We're stepping into stories pulled from Reddit, stories that are unexplained, unsettling, sometimes even terrifying. Whether you believe them or not, they have a way of lingering in the back of your mind, and that's what makes them worth listening to. So, wherever you are, settle in. Maybe you're lying in bed, maybe you're driving through the dark, or maybe you're just letting the night keep you company. Either way, relax, let the stories carry you. And enjoy the kind of thing, you know what to do. Subscribe, share, help us reach that goal of 4,000. But for now, let's leave the numbers behind. Let's begin. The first story starts with a simple question. I asked the kid I was babysitting, "What do you think lurks out there at the forest?" And he looked at me, arm as anything, and said, "My mother." I've been babysitting all summer, just trying to make some extra cash. At first, I asked around at school if anyone needed a sitter for their siblings or knew someone who might. It was simple work, easy money. But sometimes, the simplest things are the ones that turn strange the fastest. I started out babysitting kids from families I already knew. It was simple, safe, familiar. But eventually, I needed more money. So I put up an ad on Craigslist. It wasn't long before I got a response. The family lived in the suburbs, or at least that's what they called it. What unsettled me wasn't the house itself, but where it stood. Too close to the woods, no neighbors in sight. At first I hesitated. Strangers, a cabin in the woods. It sounded like the setup to a story I'd normally be telling you, not living myself. But the money was good, and I told myself to push through the unease. The house, when I arrived, was cozy. A small cabin, clean, with a garden in the back. There was a gate that led straight into the trees and little lanterns strung along the garden path. At the far end, a swing swayed gently, as if someone had just stepped off it. Inside, the living room was warm, inviting. A large window stretched across the wall facing the forest. During the day, sunlight poured in, filling the room with a golden glow. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching back. The kitchen sat right next to the living room, its counter facing yet another wide window. Pots and vines framed the glass, and the walls were dotted with those little signs you see in so many homes. Homes where the family is, or in this house, we say sorry. Upstairs, there were only 2 bedrooms, and above them, a cramped attic with a single window that, of course, faced the woods too. The guy I was watching was quiet. Honestly, I didn't feel much one way or the other about him. He wasn't mean, he wasn't sweet, just there. Maybe 5, maybe 6 years old. The kind of kid you put to bed quickly, without fuss, and then the night is yours. And that's when my curiosity usually got the better of me. I know it's not exactly recommended, but I've always had this habit. Once the house is quiet, once the kid is asleep, I start looking around, opening drawers, checking shelves, trying to piece together who these people really are. It's not about stealing, it's about knowing. About seeing the parts of a family they don't show you and they hand you 20 ducks and say, "We'll be back by midnight." And in that cabin, with the forest pressing in on every window, I couldn't help myself. I had to know who I was really working for. It must have been close to midnight when I slid open one of the drawers in the main bedroom. Inside was a jumble of trinkets, coins, notebooks, pens, the kind of useless little things families collect and scatter around their homes. I picked up a small ceramic horse, turning it in my hands. The moonlight from the window caught its porcelain, shifting across its surface as I moved. For a moment I wondered if I should take it. Would they even notice? But then, my chest tightened. My mouth went dry. The horse was no longer bathed in moonlight. Something had blocked it. A shadow. Huge. It stretched across the porcelain. Rippling. Dancing. I looked up. The shadow filled half the room. And yet there was nothing there. No shape, no figure, nothing that could have made it. That fear crept up and froze me in place. Someone was at the window. At least that's what it felt like. I told myself it could have been a bird. That was the rational explanation. And all I had to do was look up to prove it. But I didn't, because what if it wasn't a bird? So I stood there, still as stone, waiting, my chest tight, my breath shallow, until finally, the shadow passed and the horse was lit once again by the moonlight. I let out a shaky sigh of relief and slipped the little porcelain horse into my pocket. I didn't know it then, but that would be my first contact with it. Something in me shifted after that. The curiosity that had driven me to snoop around was gone, replaced by a quiet, gnawing fear. I went downstairs, turned on the TV, and curled up on the couch, trying to convince myself the glow of the screen could keep me safe. But sometime in the night I heard it, creaking from upstairs. I know it shouldn't have rattled me so badly. Houses settle, wood shifts, that's normal. But in that moment I was still so shaken that I couldn't ignore it. So I got up and I went to check. The house was dark, quiet. The 2 bedrooms upstairs faced each other, and both were empty. Empty? Where did the kid go? Jason? My voice cut through the silence, sharp and out of place. It felt wrong, like I was intruding on something that didn't belong to me. Jason, where did you go? That's when the feeling hit me, the weight of eyes watching. I turned and my gaze locked on the attic door. It was open. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out of that house and never look back. But my head, spinning, stubborn, refused. What if someone had broken in? What if they'd taken Jason? And worse, what if the shadow I'd seen earlier wasn't just a trick of the moonlight? If I'd only looked at that window then, maybe I'd know what I was dealing with now. But I hadn't, and so I stood there, trembling, my voice weaker this time. Jason? The answer came almost immediately. Yeah? The sound drifted down from the attic. Odd, too quick, too calm. What was he doing up there? I placed my foot on the first step of the stairs. Just the same black tangle of branches. But the longer I watched, the more the forest shifted. A flicker of wings, the restless stir of leaves, the wind threading through the canopy like a whisper. The forest wasn't empty at all. It was alive. And it was watching. The grass swayed gently in the wind, a slow rhythm, like breathing. And then came the shadows, those restless stains on the ground, always shifting, never still. I could have stared at them for years. Maybe that's why Jason wasn't moving. There's something about the night. It holds you, keeps you awake, as if it knows a secret you don't. What do you think lurks out there? I asked him, half playful. Where? In the woods? He didn't hesitate. My nom. Once, twice. It was unsettling. Kids say strange things, sure. But why that? Was it a joke, a slick, or something else? What do you mean? I asked. He tilted his head. What does lurk mean? I swallowed. Well, lurking is when you wait or move slowly in the dark and you don't want to be seen, like hiding. Jason nodded. But usually it's when you're waiting to do something bad, the way animals lurk before they attack. I tried to soften it and make it a game. Or monsters, I added, with a smile he couldn't see. Just trying to scare him. Or maybe myself. Yeah, that could have been her, he whispered. Stop. I'm serious. What does she want from us? Does she want to eat me? We were in his bedroom now. I'd tucked him into bed, the covers pulled up to his chin. My back was to the window, but it was the hallway behind me that felt darker than it should have. Longer, emptier, like it was waiting. She doesn't want to eat you, I said. Jason grinned. That's good. I taste horrible anyway. Good night. I started to rise, but his hand caught my wrist. Wait, don't go. Look at me. I sighed. What now? I want to tell you about this dream I had, the one that woke me up, but you have to pay attention. All right, I said, settling back down. So in my dream, I was in a garden. I was thirsty, and you were there too. You tried to leave, but there were bushes everywhere, and you got lost. And then I found this puppet. I've always hated when people tell me their dreams, but there I was, sitting in the dim light, listening, facing Jason, my back still turned to the window. It wasn't the story that held me there. It wasn't even Jason. It was the way his eyes kept darting to the window. He asked me to look at him, insisted, really. But I knew why. Because if I turned around, I'd see what he was trying not to. I'd seen the shadow cross his face, blotting out the pale wash of moonlight. So I stayed. I listened, and then, just as the moonlight returned, he stopped, abrupt. "Thank you for the story," I said softly. "It was really interesting." "You're welcome. Good night." Later, in the other bedroom, I sat with a little porcelain horse turning over in my hands. Jason was braver than I'd thought. The silence pressed in, and I strained to catch something, anything unfamiliar in the dark. But the house had fallen asleep. The night, uneventful. When his parents finally came home, I slipped the horse into my pocket and went downstairs to greet them, as if nothing had happened at all. "Was he good, Keith?" "Yeah, the best. Don't worry." I studied them both, head to toe. Their clothes, their mannerisms, the way their faces shifted on the light. But mostly, my mum. "Were you good?" the dad asked, half joking. "I hope so," I said. "They offered to drive me home, but I insisted on the bike. And when the door closed behind me, I didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, I slipped into the backyard. I just wanted to see something. Climbing the fence, I pulled myself onto the roof of the porch, right beside Jason's window. I thought maybe there'd be a sign, a clue, anything. The glass was covered in scratches. The nothing gave away what had been there. So I stood there for a long while. I don't know why. The parents had gone to sleep. Jason too, probably. And from that angle, I studied the garden. Then the woods. Silent. Still, quiet as a mouse. Then the parents' room. After that, it's a blur. I don't even remember how I got home. I don't think I took my bike. I just ran. Ran until my legs burned, until they bled. No screaming, no looking back. Just the sound of my feet pounding the ground, carrying me through the night. When I reached my house, I banged on the door. My mother opened it, annoyed, but I didn't stop. I pushed past her, straight to my room, pulled the blanket over me, and began to type. Because while I was watching the parents, something caught my eye. Whisper-thin tension. In the hallway, what I thought was a coat hanger shifted. It had been so still, so ordinary, I hadn't even noticed it until it moved. It slipped out of sight, then back again, weight of the reveal, a silhouette, bony, twisted, final whispered chill. Drag himself into the bedroom, and there it stood, right beside the mother, as she slept. It looked uncanny, like a human who had starved to death, skin stretched, eyes wide, arms so long they dragged behind it as it moved. It stood there, watching the parents. Then it lifted a bony finger and began to count. 1, 2, 3. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just watched, frozen, as it kept counting, over and over, endlessly. I thought I would be trapped there forever, staring at that awful ritual, until it happened. It saw me. That's when I ran. I don't even remember how, just the pounding of my legs, the tearing in my chest, the desperate need to get away. And now, something else. Something closer. My wife has been peeking at me. From around corners, from behind furniture. At first it was strange. Now, it's terrifying. Lynn and I have been together 6 years, married for 11 months. Our history has been ordinary, steady, Safe. No red flags, no warning signs, which is why I can't explain this, why I can't stress enough how out of character it is for her. Lynn is kind. She's intelligent, thoughtful. The sort of person who doesn't waste time on nonsense. Being childish, trying to scare me, those things just aren't her. She doesn't even like horror. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved it. She didn't even make it halfway through. Too scared, we had to turn it off. That's who she is. She's never been into anything creepy. Never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what makes this so strange. So unlike her. I should add, she's never had any mental health issues, not that I've ever seen. And as far as I know, it doesn't run in her family. I know people can hide things. I know sometimes the signs are subtle. But in 6 years together, I would have noticed something. Wouldn't I? It was 2 months ago. I was in the kitchen making coffee before work. Running late, already knowing I wouldn't have time to stop at Dunkin'. I took a dip as I hurried down the hall toward the front door, burned my lips in the rush, and that's when I saw her. Lynn. Just her eyes peeking from around the corner, a strand of her dark hair against the wall, the rest of her body hidden. I nearly spilled the cup. "Geez, Lynn," I muttered, wiping the drops from my pants. "You scared the hell out of me." And then she was gone. She popped out of sight like a child caught in the act. I heard her scurrying toward the living room, quick, light steps. By the time I reached the front door, she had vanished as if she'd never been there at all. It was strange. Out of character, yes, but also a little funny. She was being playful, lighter than usual. I shouted that I loved her, called her a weirdo, and as I shut the door behind me, I heard her laugh. Odd, yes, but not the kind of thing you call a priest over. By lunch, I'd forgotten. By evening, she was herself again. We didn't bring it up. Life went on. Until 3 nights later. It was 2 a.m. I'd woken for a drink, standing at the kitchen island with a jug of orange juice in my hand. That's when I felt it. Eyes on me. I don't know why, but I looked down. There she was, my wife, her face peeking up at me from the other side of the island, wide, unblinking eyes, grinning, just staring. Grinning like a Cheshire cat. I screamed. I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. Lynn scuttled backward, out of sight, her hands and feet smacking against the tile as she hurried from the kitchen on all fours. I didn't chase her. I didn't even call her name. I just stood there, frozen, wondering what could have possessed her to move like that. Took me longer than I'd like to admit to climb the stairs, but eventually I did. In our bedroom, she was lying on her side, asleep, or pretending. And he stood there for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, making sure it was real. I had the feeling she might leap at me the moment I slipped beneath the covers, but she didn't. I climbed into bed, and she didn't move at all. Her breathing was soft, deep, and for a moment I wondered if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee. I handed her a mug, kissed her cheek, and tried to keep my voice light. "What was that about last night?" I asked. She frowned into her cock, shaking her head as if she had no idea what I meant. "You were peeking at me again," I said, pointing toward the kitchen island from over there. She followed my gaze, and when her eyes came back to mine, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me out sometimes, you know that," I said. She giggled, set her coffee down, and slipped her arms around my neck. And in that moment, it almost felt normal again. "Only you creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. But as I drove, I couldn't shake it. The image of her grinning at me from behind the island, the sound of her hands on the tile as she crawled away. I told myself she was just being silly, just trying to share in my love of horror. It wasn't that I was afraid of her, but it didn't sit right with me. And then it started happening more. I catch her peeking from behind the couch, from between the curtains in the living room. Once, she even managed to squeeze herself into her grandmother's old trunk at the foot of our bed. I might never have known she was there at all if the hinges hadn't betrayed her. The lid was propped open just enough for half of her face to peek through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer. She just lowered the lid, slowly, shutting herself inside the trunk. I walked away, disturbed. I didn't understand it, but it seemed to make her happy, and I told myself maybe she'd tire of the game. For 2 weeks she didn't pee at me, not once, and I started to believe it was over, that she'd moved on. I was relieved. One night we were watching a show on Netflix, the glow of the screen soft against her face, and I joked lightly that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately. That maybe she'd have given up on her little spy game. I smiled when I said it, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She looked up at me with a small smile. "Maybe I've just gotten better at it," she said. I didn't answer. I just sat there, wondering if she was joking or not. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking? Had I missed it? If so, what was she getting out of it? The thought gnawed at me. I started checking corners, glancing behind doors, peeking over my shoulder whenever she wasn't in full view. I felt paranoid, jumpy, stupid, crazy. But then, weeks passed. No incidents, no peeking, and slowly I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture, started scanning the walls, told myself it was just a bad memory. And then, a few days ago, things got so much worse. Len had gone to a friend's. I'd spent the evening on the couch, a couple of games on my laptop. Nothing unusual. Around 9, I stepped into the shower. The water was warm, the steam rising, soap in my hair, and then that feeling, that awful, crawling feeling of being watched. I opened my eyes, slowly, and nearly collapsed. Lynn was there, her entire head stretched past the curtain into the shower, her body still outside. Her long dark hair clung to the plastic, dripping. Her mouth hung open, a terrible grin, her eyes wide red, unblinking, as if she hadn't closed them in hours. I screamed, stumbled back against the wall, but she didn't move. Her smile didn't falter. Black streaks of makeup ran down her cheeks. Hey, she looked giddy, deranged, and in that moment, I was more afraid of her than I had ever been of anything in my life. We stood like that for what felt like forever. Neither of us speaking, neither of us moving. And then, slowly, she pulled her head back out of the shower. Through the curtain, I watched her blurred outline retreat toward the door. A second later, it slammed shut. So hard the mirror rattled. I screamed again, leapt from the shower, and locked the door. I stayed in that bathroom for over an hour, pacing, listening, telling myself I wasn't going to put up with this anymore, joke or not, whatever this was. Every few minutes I stopped, held my breath, pressed my ear against the door, and then the sound, muffled, low, just beyond the wood. I strained to hear, heart pounding, wondering if she was still there, waiting. I couldn't hear anything, but in my mind I pictured Lynn standing just on the other side of the door, giggling at her little joke. And that's all lit something in me. Anger. I was furious at being made to feel unsafe in my own house. Furious at hiding in the bathroom for an hour. All but what? Some joke? What the hell then? I snapped. This is getting crazy. Annoying. I waited for her to laugh, to apologize, to call me a jerk, but instead, I heard it. A moan. Faint. So quiet I wasn't sure I'd heard it at all. Then silence. Lynn? I called, my voice shaking despite myself. Nothing, just my own breathing, heavy in the stillness. I swear to God, just stop it, I shouted, pounding my fist against the door. I waited for her to yell back, to cuss me out the way she always would if I spoke to her like that. But there was nothing. Only silence, pressing in on me from the other side. But now, there was nothing. Only the drip of the showerhead. I won't deny it, I was terrified, too afraid to open the door, too afraid to face my own wife. 30 minutes passed, or maybe a lifetime. When you're scared, time doesn't move the same. Finally, I told myself I couldn't spend the night locked in a bathroom, so I dropped to my knees, pressed my cheek to the cold tile, and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face waiting for me there, grinning, but thank God it wasn't. The hallway stretched empty, straight down to the top of the stairs. No Lynn. I didn't know if that made me relieved or more afraid. I stayed there, watching, waiting for her head to cross as a top step, but it never did. I stood, my hand hovered over the knob, and I tried to steady my breathing, tried to prepare myself to open the door. My fingers shook as I turned the lock. I was ready to yank the door open, ready to end this. And then I heard it. A moan, louder than before, so loud I knew exactly where it came from. I turned my head, slowly, toward the nearest door. And there she was. Lynn, peeking at me through the narrow gap. Her eyes wide, unblinking. Her mouth stretched into the most grotesque smile I'd ever seen. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I was too afraid for even that. Her hands were clasped tight against her chest, her body trembling with sheer delight, as though she could barely contain herself. And then it came, a short, raspy moan bubbling up from her throat. Deep, raw. The sound crawled through me and left a shiver in every bone. Somehow, I found the strength to pull the bathroom door open. And then I ran. Down the steps as fast as I could, snatching my keys, my phone from the table, and straight out the front door. Behind me I heard her. That shrill laughter. But no footsteps, no chase, just the sound of her joy echoing through the house. I didn't even close the door. Edgar. I threw myself into the car and drove. Faster than I should have, shivering the whole way from fear, from the cold, maybe both. No goat, no shoes, still in my boxers, hair damp from the shower. I drove 40 minutes straight to my brother Chris's house, ignored every call, every text, and only when I was parked in his driveway, engine still running, did I finally look down at my phone. Lynn had called 4 times, sent a flood of texts, all of them asking where I'd gone, why I'd left like that. I held my phone at the dash, furious at her tone, so casual, so nonchalant. When I showed up at my brother's house, Chris and his wife were stunned, me standing there in nothing but boxers. They didn't ask questions. They just told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris handed me some clothes, asked what had happened, and I told him Lynn and I had a fight. That was all. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. Hadn't I always told her to lighten up? To loosen that serious edge? I'd wanted her to relax. That this wasn't what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on the sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. That grin, those eyes. And the silence of the house around me felt anything but safe. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Thought made my skin crawl, knowing she'd never left the bathroom at all, that she'd slipped into the closet, slammed the door shut, just to fool me. The idea of going back home filled me with anxiety. I tossed, I turned. Sleep wouldn't come. Chris finally gave me a pill and I drifted off. But my dreams were worse. All of them her face. That smile. I woke as the sun began to rise, my body sore from the sofa, my mind drained. I knew I'd have to call her. But what would I even say? I wasn't going home unless she promised she'd stop this. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self. That version of her had never looked so good to me. I was still turning over in my head, still rehearsing what I'd say when it hit me. That feeling. The one I come to dread. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart lodged in my throat. The longer I ignored the feeling, the heavier it pressed down on me. And then my eyes drifted, almost on their own. Her face, pressed against the window beside the couch. That same gaping smile, drool sliding down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks across the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something in me whispered, all night. I didn't scream. Couldn't. Anger burned hotter than fear. I leapt from the couch, slammed my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell's wrong with you? Just go home now. She didn't move, didn't blink, her ghastly expression frozen in place, and then her smile grew wider, as if she had never been more delighted in her life. I could hear Chris and Rebecca moving upstairs, and it was as if Lynn could hear them too. Her head twitched in their direction, her mouth began to close, slowly. Chris called my name, his voice edged with concern. I turned toward the stairs, saw them hurrying down, and when I looked back, she was gone. The only trace she'd been there at all were the 2 streaks of drool, still sliding down the glass. I tried to explain. Tried to tell them what I'd seen, Lynn's face at the window watching me. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside where she should have been, but there were no footprints. Nothing in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal probably, Chris said, and I didn't argue. I couldn't, focusing on every word like a shared secret in the stillness of night. Chris and Rebecca thought I dreamt it all. And maybe that would have been easier. But they didn't understand, and I was too tired to make them. I called out of work, shut myself down. Even the thought of talking to Lynn was too much. By then, I'd started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter what she promised, we'd never be the same again. The thought hollowed me out. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I told myself I was ready. Ready to confront her, to give her one last chance to explain. After 6 years together, I could at least give her that. I turned my phone back on. Dozens of texts, all from her. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you and to just come home? And more of the same. The words of a concerned wife. Or at least that's how they looked on the screen. Every text said the same thing. That she loved me, that she wanted me home, that she was worrying, but not a single one mentioned the crazy things she'd done. Not one word about the way she'd looked at me, the way she'd scuttled across the floor on all fours, the way she'd grinned at me from inside the closet. It was like none of it had happened, like she was pretending to be someone else entirely. Even her texts were different. She usually wrote novels just to tell me to pick up bread, but now she had nothing more to say than a handful of short, sweet lines, and that somehow was worse. I know it probably sounds childish from the outside, but if you'd seen her face, if you'd seen the way she moved, you'd understand why I reacted the way I did. I stayed another night with Chris and Rebecca, didn't wake until the afternoon. And when I opened my eyes, thank God, there was no face at the window. I didn't ask questions, didn't pry, it wasn't my place. But the silence between us all was louder than anything Lynn had ever done. But is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich, her way of easing into the subject without seeming nosy. I don't know, I said carefully. She's like a different person. I wasn't ready for them to know the full extent of it, the madness I'd been living with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said. Ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now, I admitted. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her. The words stung as they left my mouth, because I missed her. I loved her. But how could I live like that? In constant fear. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, Rebecca said softly. I don't know about that, I whispered back, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument could have been. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to sink in, and when they did, dread spread through me like heat under my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? My mouth was suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded, casual as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her, it wasn't. She stopped by this morning, just after Chris left for work, she said, clearing the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? Sweat prickled across my forehead. My eyes darted around the room. Corners, doorways, shadows, as though a predator might be crouched there, waiting. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, Rebecca said. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she told me no. Just let you sleep. She said it so casually, rinsing dishes at the sink. That's all. She didn't say anything else, but she looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days. I really think you should call her. I thanked Rebecca for lunch, and for a moment I felt lighter. Relieved even, knowing Lynn hadn't come inside. Still, I checked the locks. Twice. Then I sat there, staring at nothing, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed her something. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her in sickness and in health? And if she was sick, which I truly believe she was, then I had to try. I had to get her the help she needed, even if the thought of faithing her made my skin crawl. I didn't even know where to start. Calling the police? What would I tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? Bizarre as she'd been, she hadn't committed a crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have just said I was overreacting. But this wasn't a prank. It felt wrong, dangerous, like something sinister was hiding behind her smile. I knew, as her husband, I had the right to have her committed, but what if she act normal in front of them? What if she fooled them the way she fooled Rebecca? Just another concerned wife. If the doctors didn't see her the danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her. 72 hours later, she'd be back. And then what? I sat there, lost, overwhelmed, caught between love and fear, and the truth I couldn't escape was this. I didn't trust my own wife anymore. I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Marianne and I were never on the best of terms. We never fought, but she wasn't warm. Not easy to be around. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, it was only lips that moved. Thin, tight. Her eyes stayed blank. She carried this aura, like she's always on the offensive. Like every word, every glance was a test you were bound to fail. I'd only met her twice. Both times short, merciful visits. And both times I got the impression that she didn't approve of me. Didn't approve of me for her daughter. Len always hurried us out quickly, not wanting me to feel uncomfortable, and I was grateful for that. Because being in her mother's company was unbearable. like walking on glass. Every step sharp, every breath too loud. I was glad when we moved 3 states away. Glad to put distance between us and Marianne. But now I needed her help. I didn't want to call her. God, I didn't. But who else could I turn to? Who knew Lynn better than her own mother? So I clenched my teeth, and I dialed. Yes, she answered, already irritated. Marianne, it's me. Ben, do you have a minute to talk? I heard her cluck her tongue. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. Her voice was cool, sharp, like a blade pressed flat against my skin. It's about Lynn, I said carefully. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin, she tut in. And just like that, I felt smaller. Like a child being scolded, like I'd made a mistake even opening my mouth. What is this you want from me? She asked, and I could almost see her, thin sweater, slacks, fingernails tapping impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior, any mental health issues, I said. There was a pause, long, uncomfortable. I couldn't tell if she was thinking or if she was simply letting me squirm. Finally, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind me, I cut her off. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm seriously concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well. My voice cracked with frustration. But on the other end of the line, all I heard was silence. Cold. Heavy. Like she was weighing something she had no intention of sharing. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me, she snacked. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason, I was desperate not to let her. Because deep down, I knew she would be holding something back. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn, I begged. And then I heard it, a faint, shaky breath, like she was trying to hold her steel mask together, and failing. Marianne, what's wrong? I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but the line was already dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to wrap my head around the call. Her refusal to help me, even if she didn't like me, she was Lynn's mother. And yet, she'd shut me out. Which only made me wonder what it was she wasn't saying. Why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't make sense of it. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, desperate to catch something I'd missed. And then it came back to me. Her last words. She'd said it with urgency. Her voice had shifted just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Maybe I was grasping at straws, but no. I was sure those words meant more than they seemed. Had she meant doctors, psychiatrists, or someone else entirely? Someone she couldn't bring herself to name? Or maybe it was just me. Really, I was desperate to find meaning where there was none. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a long, exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I finally convinced them. Lynn needed help. Real help. And saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I could never step back from. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't ready for that. But I told them about the last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were shocked, but they believed me. And for that, I was grateful. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird? Sure. But not dangerous. Rebecca even suggested, half-heartedly, that maybe Lynn was pulling some kind of stunt for YouTube, maybe. Chris didn't think we should involve the police, not yet. Instead, he offered to go with me, and I accepted without hesitation. He reasoned that the best way forward was to talk to her calmly, to coax her into going willingly. And I agreed, because at least this way, I wouldn't be walking into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast, because there was no way I was going in at night. We pulled into the driveway. My stomach turned somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought I'd see her eyes tearing through the gap. I was shaking, sweating. Chris, though, he was fine. Hands in his pockets like we were out for a stroll in the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and the stench hit me rot. Chris flinched too, scrunching his nose. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here?" he muttered. "Shh," he added quickly. "Shut up," I hissed, my eyes darting through the shadows, searching for any sign of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark. Despite it being 10 in the morning, every curtain pulled tight, refusing to let in the light. And if I hadn't left it just 2 days ago, I would have sworn the place had been abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking the places she might hide, occasionally calling her name. "Why are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked finally. "Are we looking for your wife?" The way he looked at me like I was losing it. "Let's just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head, but followed anyway. On the way up, my shoes crunched over glass, shards scattered across the steps. I stopped and looked up. One of our wedding portraits, the one that hung on the staircase wall, had been smashed. The frame hung crooked, all the glass stripped away. I stared at the picture, a lump rising in my throat. We'd taken it just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. Radiant. Alive? I looked at Lynn's face in that photo, her beautiful face, and for a moment, I almost forgot my nightmare. In a low, hushed and almost whispering tone, with slow and measured pauses to let the weight of each moment sink in, I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps. Checked the spare bedroom. Untouched. Silent. I hesitated at the bathroom door. The memory of that night came rushing back all at once. Chris noticed, offered to go in alone, but I couldn't let him. So we went in together. Closet, shower, nothing. The bathroom looked exactly as it had the night I left, frozen in time. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll come back tomorrow," Chris said. I nodded, went into our bedroom, started shoveling clothes into a duffel bag, and then the smell. I opened the closet and gagged. Chris took one look, the colour drained from his face. He staggered back, hand over his mouth, and went to stand by the stairs. Anything to get away from the sight and the smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, laid out carefully in pairs. Some as large as quarters, others no bigger than marbles. I stared at them, at the tiny trophies she'd collected from small animals, and I shuddered of how she'd bitten them. With a grimace, "Man, thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. Eek, but your wife's in here collecting eyeballs." "Then I think we should go," he called from the hall. "I'm getting nauseous." "All right." I grabbed my duffel, shut the closet door on my new nightmare, stepped out into the hall, and took a deep breath. But the rot clung to me. I could taste it on my tongue, and I gagged again. "Who lines up eyeballs in their closet like that?" Chris muttered. I swallowed hard. "I tried to tell you," I said. "She needs help." "She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs an exorcist," Chris muttered. "You coming or what? I can't stand the smell." But then his words died in his throat. His eyes went wide. I didn't ask him why, because I could feel it, the weight of someone watching me. And it wasn't the eyes in the closet. I turned slowly, my gaze sweeping across the bedroom. And then I saw her, under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a child on Christmas morning, her hands praying together beneath her chin, shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear it. The quiet noises in her throat, a hiccuping sound, like her excitement was too much to contain. Her wide eyes, a huge smile. Everything in me screamed to run, but I forced it down, because this was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. "Lynn?" I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed, 2 quick little movements like a nod. "Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that?" I took a single step forward, careful, like approaching a dangerous animal. "I love you, Lynn," I whispered, taking another step closer. A tiny moan slipped from her wide-open mouth, and I had to fight the urge to run. Her shoulders quivered, her eyes grew wide, saucers of white and black. I crouched down, trying to see her better, and that's when I saw it. The blood, her hands were drenched in it, trembling harder the closer I came, as if she could barely contain herself. "Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding?" I asked. Her bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers twitching, moving up and down, like she was playing an invisible piano. In a low, almost whispered tone, every word slow and deliberate like a gentle breeze across the microphone. Her bloody fingers grazed her chin, leaving smears across her skin. I wanted to recoil. The smell rolling off her was so foul, I could feel bile clawing its way up my throat. Her lips were cracked, dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between them. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I couldn't leave her like this. So I inched closer. The hiccuping sounds grew louder, her hands trembling, fingers flexing. And then I saw it, the blood oozing between them. "Oh my God. Lynn, you're bleeding," I whispered. Instinct took over, I reached for her hand. But before I could touch her, she lashed out. A sharp pain tore through my arm. I fell back hard, my body hitting the floor. My arm burned. Blood dripped onto the carpet. I looked up at her in shock, and she was grinning. Madly, her fingers clenched tight around a jagged shard of glass. "You all right in there?" Chris called from behind me. I turned my head just enough to nod, cradling my arm tight against my chest. But when I looked back at Lynn, her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were locked on Chris, glaring at him the way a hungry lion might fix on an antelope. Her mouth still hung open, but now it was twisted into a snarl. I pushed myself to my feet, backing slowly down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. "Are you bleeding?" Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn moved. She scooted out from under the bed, fast, the shard of glass still clenched in her fist. "Chris, run, go!" I shouted, but he didn't move, couldn't. And a second later, I felt my back collide with his chest. We were trapped together, and she was coming. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled fully out from under the bed. Now she stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her body was taut, every muscle straining. Blood ran down her fingers, dripping onto the floorboards. "Jesus, Lynn," Chris stammered. "You, playing hide and seek?" I reached back, pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I whispered, quiet but firm. Lynn head bobbed in sharp, jerking motion, then she began to grin. Her mouth stretched wider and wider, until her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was gone, running downstairs. I stayed, at the top of the steps, caught between two truths. The love for a woman who clearly needed help, and the instinct to survive. "I only want to help," I choked out, tears burning my eyes. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. Her or myself. Her eyes locked on me again. She raised the shard of glass, holding it out like a promise. And then she ran, grinning, wild with excitement. My body moved before my mind could. I flew down the stairs, skipping 2-3 steps at a time. I hit the front door, but before I could tear it open, I felt her, arms wrapping around my neck, her mouth pressed to my ear. Those terrible hiccuping sounds so close I could feel them in my bones. I threw her off me. She hit the floor. A searing pain ripped across my back, but I didn't stop. I tore the door open and bolted into the daylight. Chris was in the yard, phone pressed to his ear, talking to the police. I didn't say a word, just sprinted to my car, slammed the door, and started the engine. Chris took the hint. He followed, still on the line with 911, and we left her there, in that house, behind us. I kept watching the rearview mirror, certain I'd see her there, running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER. 11 stitches in my arm, 3 more in my back. The police asked the questions. They went back to the house, but of course Lynn wasn't there. They told me to stay with a friend, file a restraining order, take precautions, but none of it mattered. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home, and then drove an hour away to a motel. I wanted distance, as much as I could put between me and her, and that's where I've been for the past 4 hours. At first, I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she so desperately needed. But now, I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. I found you. And a picture attached. The picture was dark, grainy, but I knew instantly what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after because I don't know what to do. I'm alone. I'm scared. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. That's all I've got for tonight's stories. I really hope you enjoyed them because honestly, I think they're fascinating. Creepy, unsettling, sometimes even unbelievable, but always worth the read and worth the listen. If you'd like to hear more videos like this in the future, let me know. I had a lot of fun putting this one together, and I'd love to keep exploring these strange corners of the internet with you. Whether these stories are real or not, well, that's up to you to decide. So if you've made it this far, almost an hour in, thank you. Consider subscribing. Maybe drop a like, it really helps me out. And until next time, sleep well.